My assigned topic, how we stop fracking in New York State, and you should know that 1 week from today will be our 1-year anniversary when Governor Cuomo announced a statewide ban on fracking, and for those of us in New Yorkers Against Fracking, that was a complete and total victory. I have 10 kind of tools and lessons to offer that are useful, I hope might be useful in your own fight. It sounds like I've started with an art history lesson instead, but actually I've already shared with you one of our strategies, which is to ask of people to do big things. And that means we have to do, as leaders, we do big and heroic things too. So if we're asking for people to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and take the day off of work without pay and get on the bus and come with us to Albany for a march or for a rally or for a testimony, then we always show up too, no matter how difficult it might be. We have asked people to write their own unique comments to Governor Cuomo and to the Department of Environmental Conservation during the formal period of when regulations were being drafted and everything looked like it was going south. And we didn't want people just to click on a petition link. We wanted people to learn the science for themselves, write it in their own words, and send it in and do it again and again and again. Even if the 30 days that we had for comment period were right over the holidays, we wanted you to have a holiday comment writing party where your guests couldn't leave the house until they wrote their comment against fracking. And so by doing this ourselves and by translating the science and posting it to make it possible for people to take the data and understand it, then we told people they could be part of something big and heroic. We directed 260,000 public comments, magnitudes bigger than any number that had previously been sent to Albany, and we actually buried the draft regulations in so many comments that the state agency couldn't read them all and respond to them before the deadline elapsed, and that actually bought us time. And it also built all this momentum, and the more people do big things for you, the more they have at stake, the more they're invested, because they've already given up days of work. They've already spent their holidays writing comments. And so now, if things start to tip forward and look bad, they're ready to take to the streets with you and march with you. So action breeds more action. And instead of asking people to do something small and ramp up, I think we offer people a chance to be part of something really big and monumental. Something like Hercules. The second thing is to let the science lead us. The science is really on our side. There are now more than 500 articles in the peer-reviewed scientific literature. The vast majority of those find real evidence for harm and real risks of fracking. And this makes a very powerful statement in and of itself. And so we're not afraid of the science. We lead it. We give the science to other scientists and health professionals, to our elected officials, and to that end, a group of us then within New Yorkers Against Fracking who have membership in the scientific community formed another small group called Concerned Health Professionals of New York. We began to review the science, and we continued to release it. We sent it to our governor, we sent it to elected officials, to our commissioner of health, we sent it to the public, and so forth. And I brought a copy with me. Now, I'm just going to pass around. This is our compendium of scientific, medical, and media findings demonstrating the risks and harms of fracking. This is the 3rd edition. So we update it every few months because the evidence against science is actually exponential, and we're writing in a moving stream of data, and the evidence against fracking keeps getting stronger and stronger and bigger. This is on our website. It's available to you as a free download. This is the 3rd edition we just released. The other editions have been translated. The 3rd edition is now being translated into Spanish. We would love to have a French edition. So if anyone anyone wants it translated into language and knows how to help us do that, let me know. And we definitely want to make it available. You should not have to reinvent the process of putting all the data together. We've done that for you. Third, we organize health professionals and scientists. So related to that, we brought health professionals out into the public to our elected legislatures and had them talk about the evidence. And to do that really requires a lot of help for scientists and doctors and nurses, because we tend to be not only busy people, but not very socially adequate. And we don't really know how to do sound bites and say the most important thing first and not give a long lecture. So we really need, you need a communication specialist to work closely with your doctors and nurses and scientists so they know how to write a press release and can give a good quote to the media, and they can line up and figure out who should be first to speak at the podium and then get the press together. So you need somebody like that to work with the doctors and nurses and the scientists who will speak on your behalf. Organize faith leaders, that's my fourth piece of advice. Faith leaders, unlike scientists, are great public speakers. They don't really need a lot of help to how to put their message out there. We organize more than 500 churches and synagogues, and they give a moral authority to the argument and can really express the human rights dimensions of fracking. And also water is a sacred element for all major religions, and so that the water message is works very well for faith leaders to deliver. Fifth, organize businesses. We organize businesses against fracking, more than 1,000 of them. For us, some of the most important ones were the winemakers, because New York is the winemaking area of the United States. So is the state called California, but we think we're pretty good. And it's a major economic driver of our state. It's a multi-billion-dollar-a-year business. So when the winemakers say this is the threat to our wine, we even had one winemaker do a special label of wine called "No Fracking Away Red," and that got a lot of attention. And so that was very determinative and influential. Sixth, we bird dogged the governor, who was that was the face of our target, was our governor. Bird dogging is a word that we use, the dogs that go like this, right, and point their tails to look at where the prey is, the quail in the bush. So we showed up wherever the governor was. Whenever the governor is, there's lots of media. So all it takes is 4 or 5 people with no fracking signs, and then you'll be in the paper the next day, and it sends a message to your elected official that you're everywhere. So when he goes to church, when he goes out to vote, when he gives a talk on some completely unrelated topic, he gives a press release, whatever it is, and he's in public, we were always there too. And then seventh, civil disobedience was a role for us, and that might come as a surprise because we actually didn't deploy it. But what we did do at one point during the very dark days when it looked like the state was going to be rolling out a pilot project was that we asked people to sign a pledge of resistance, which meant that you took a solemn commitment to do civil disobedience if even one well anywhere in New York was to be fracked. And eventually we had 7,000 people signing the pledge. We had 3,000 signatures before one of our major marches and rally, and we actually delivered them in person to the governor's door. And one of the people who helped us deliver them was the grandson of Mahatma Gandhi, who's a New Yorker. His name is Arun Gandhi. He signed his pledge of resistance with his grandfather's pen right outside the governor's door and gave a short and moving speech in which he said that his grandfather had marched to the sea as a form of civil disobedience to make salt, and now, because of climate change, the sea is marching to us. And that had just happened after Hurricane Sandy had filled New York's subways with seawater. And so we think that the power of those signatures played a role. So we didn't ever have to do civil disobedience. But people were trained for it, they were prepared for it. It was clearly going to be our next step. Now, we have deployed civil disobedience in our fight against fracking infrastructure, which has not yet been a victorious fight, but we intend to turn it into one. So although we have banned fracking in our state, fracked gas from out-of-state drilling and fracking operations come into our state through pipelines and compressor stations, and fracking waste is being dumped into our landfills and so forth and so on. I happen to live next to a lake which is proposed to be turned into a giant storage depot for fracked gas, and the actual vessels to store the gas are old abandoned salt mines left over from generations of salt mining. This is right on the shores of Seneca Lake, the largest lake in New York State. And so because that project has already been approved, civil disobedience was started, and we now have more than 400 arrests. In fact, there were just 18 people arrested there yesterday in civil disobedience. So that's why I'm wearing my We Are Seneca Lake. In solidarity with my people back at home. You can read more about it on this poster. You can see one of our blockades. We blocked the driveway of a compressor station so the trucks can't get in and out. And this particular photo was this summer when the Pope had released the encyclical, and so we had this giant 7-foot replica of the encyclical on climate change that we blockaded with, and when the deputy sheriffs came to arrest us, they were too afraid to touch or move the encyclical, which had the Pope's figure on it, so they let a few people who weren't intended to get arrested kind of carry the book away. And let's see, John, can you pass these around? And for those who are interested, I have at least 20 or 30 copies of the brochure about how we do things at Seneca Lake and why we do it, which you're free to keep. Lesson 8 is to make it visible. We used a lot of visual graphics and memes to show the harms of fracking, and that was really important to us in our education and outreach campaign. I think it continues to be a challenge for how to do this, and I'm really interested in graphic designers and artists getting involved in this trying to make it visible thing. As was pointed out in our panel just now, of this unholy trinity of coal, oil, and natural gas is the one that's invisible. It's odorless. You can't see it. Coal and oil are, there's coal trains. You've seen all the pictures of oil spills and covering animals, and it looks bad and nasty. But gas, if coal, oil, and natural gas are the unholy trinity, then natural gas is the unholy ghost of the three. You simply can't see it. And so that's why I think we can have a complete catastrophe like the leak at Porter Ranch in California, where one leak from one gas storage facility is putting the gas equivalent into the air of 160,000 cars running for an entire year. It's 25% of the methane in California is this one leak from one gas station, from one gas storage facility, and it can't be fixed. Nobody knows how to fix it. It might be fixed by March. So essentially, it's the Deepwater horizon for the atmosphere, and there's no 24-hour spill cams the way we saw on the news every night when Deepwater Horizon happened. So Governor Jerry Brown gets to come here to COP and be a climate hero and be hailed for all of his great climate carbon trading and solar panels, and meanwhile this natural gas facility is just spewing and spewing carbon into our atmosphere. It's almost as if the governor of Louisiana had come to COP while Deepwater Horizon was still spewing, and he was hailed as a climate hero. The difference is we don't have the birds covered in black goo to be on the evening news. So the challenge of making it visible, I think, is up to us, and how do we do that? I think one thing we can be inspired by is what 350.org has done for carbon dioxide, which is also invisible. It doesn't sound so bad, right? It's your exhaled breath after all. But what 350 did is it literally took the number 350 parts per million and turned it into a meme and made carbon emissions a metric, something that we can think about and have limits on. And we need to do that for methane. And I don't know exactly how we should do it, but I would love 350 to actually change its name, to have 350 plus, and then whatever the so-called safe threshold for methane is, so we can really start thinking about that. We also need to always make clear that when we say carbon emissions, we're not just talking about carbon dioxide. Exxon does that, right? It talks about reducing carbon emissions, and it turns out that's just the first name for carbon dioxide. That conveniently is like a fancy sleight of hand that lets methane off the hook entirely and renders it invisible. So we always need to talk about the two climate criminals. We can't just arrest one, carbon dioxide, and let the other one go free. methane. So that's an ongoing challenge. And then ninth, you have to provide hope for people. And how to do that and be really honest about the direness of our situation is a bit of a tightrope walk. But I think whatever your source of hope is, however you've personally learned to have hope in a time of really dire circumstances, that needs to be used, because there are plenty of times when the possibility of a really bad outcome is greater than this turning out all right, that people still have hope. And Annie Dillard writes about that when she talks about the manuals that ambulance drivers and emergency response teams use to know how to talk to people who have been critically injured. And she writes about what ambulance drivers are told to say when they come upon a very seriously wounded person who asks, "Am I going to die?" And the answer is, "You have some very serious injuries, but I'm not giving up on you." Right? And so when an ambulance comes upon you, no matter how bad you are, you expect them to work aggressively against all odds to save you. And that's the same spirit that we need to bring to climate change and to fracking, and to inspire other people to say, we're not giving up on life, we're not giving up on this planet. We all are called now to be ambulance drivers. All right, so my last lesson to offer actually doubles as an introduction to our final speaker. And it is to bring the stories of frontline affected people into the public media, to your elected officials, and let the frontline affected people be the hosts, so that, and Ray has done this as well, to bring elected officials to these places, to tour them, and to hear firsthand from an affected person. So my friend, my Hercules, John Fenton, lives in Pavilion, Wyoming. He's both a Hercules and a Good Samaritan, and like me, a cancer survivor. He teaches me how to have hope in times of great desperation, and when one has been injured and one's water ruined and one's cattle made sick, and he knows how to work when tired, sick, and scared. And that's a lesson for all of us. John Fenton, aka Hercules.